Well, thanks for meeting with me here, Vincent. Could you tell me about some of the books you've written?
Okay, so the first one was relating to the Swiss National Bank. And I was amazed because it had some success in the US at some Ivy League, I think like Harvard, Princeton universities.
What was it about?
And it wasn't even translated in English. And it was about the Swiss National Bank, what kind of financial schemes they made to perform their own quantitative easing, and so there was a technical part, and there was also a more political part, and even a historical political part to show a little bit how monetary policy has been conducted in Switzerland over the past decades. And
what was the biggest thing you think you discovered there?
The ones I liked more was about how laws were getting passed by the politicians and the people not understanding anything about it, and how it's been a constant in Swiss history over decades. Maybe the most important part is about this repo market scheme that the central banks are an essential part of, and which I feel will be very important in the next financial crisis.
And what is the repo market, you think?
Repo market, it's about, basically, I guess you could say, it's about lowering the cost of debt. So how do we get states that are getting bankrupt and still the cost of debt is almost zero?
Okay. And so what's your next book? You had
the next
here's
one,
the first one here.
The second one was Après la crise.
Before the crisis here.
After the crisis. It's called actually.
After the crisis here.
And so it was about anticipating. I was feeling like if we know about these central banking funky stuff that they are doing, and everybody knows where it's heading eventually, then certainly we have a plan for after the next crisis. And then I was at the same time we had lots of talks in Switzerland about universal basic income and helicopter money, but not the one that you have in the US right now, but central bank-based type of helicopter money or basic income, where it is the central bank that is producing the money and injecting it directly to the people, not over the IRS or the fiscal authority as is being done. And to do that, actually, you need to change the monetary system, because it doesn't work that way at present. You cannot have central banks just creating money. I know we are always talking about central banks printing money, but it's kind of a simplification, or maybe another simplification.
Yeah. So how does it work actually? How is money
how
created?
does it work? It's more about the financial system giving assets to the central banks, and the central bank giving in exchange. What they do, maybe there are many schemes, and different central banks, like the ECB, they have some funky instruments that are a bit different than what we have, I guess, in Switzerland, for instance, and certainly in the US it's also different. But what I've discovered with the Swiss National Bank is that the Swiss banks would give some assets to the National Bank, which will be exchanged for foreign assets so as to lower the franc. I don't know, it's a bit technical, maybe we'll edit that out. And so the banks give assets to the Swiss National Bank, and in exchange for that, the National Bank will give electronic money to the banks, and they will be able to gamble with this electronic token type of money on these repo markets, typically, which is described by the Bundesbank, so the German central bank, as a big bubble. It's a systemic risk. It's a huge systemic risk for the stability of the financial system, this repo market thing, and it's huge. It's trillions of euros, of dollars, etc., and it's transnational. So it's in the whole world. You have this thing, and so I had this intuition that it could be the detonator or the catalyst of the next crisis. Exactly.
Okay, great. And then you got, when was the next one? This one?
The third one, Civilization in Crisis. It pertains more to artificial intelligence things, and it's about the more social engineering oriented aspects of it. I think actually I think that it won't happen, most things, but I found it interesting to explore a little bit the possibilities and the plans, because there are lots of plans to, like, you want to get a loan, okay, but an artificial intelligence, like a black box, is going to analyze whether you're the right person to get the loan at what price also. And so it would be big data oriented, and you wouldn't exactly know. And the central bankers, like the central bankers from Germany, for instance, they have talked a lot about what the risks would be if we let this kind of things happen. Because and also the French Parliament, they have been working on it. What would happen if you just can have a black box telling you that yes, James is rate has a triple A and this has a triple B, and you don't really know what's behind. And you have people also offering, making the proposal to put some biases inside it, like the European Commission, for instance, saying that you have some categories in the population that are disenfranchised, like some ethnic groups or some sexual orientation groups, and so you must give them an advantage. And this kind of black box type of functioning would help give them an advantage secretly without maybe saying it, but it will help to have a more just society.
Sounds very market-oriented and very fair, right?
Indeed.
Okay. So then, and then finally, your last book, I guess, how do you say that in English?
How would that be translated in English? It would be something like enslavement. Yeah, it's
digital,
very dark. It's
digital enslavement, huh?
Yeah.
The dehumanization of society and this slavery of numbers, huh?
Exactly. So I explore a few more dark stuff, but there is also this social engineering part that I focus a little bit on, and it's more about social designs that you would that have been going on in Western society for like 100 or 200 years. Also, I go to the roots of the LGBT movement to see a little bit what it's about, and then it goes a little bit in the direction also of demographics. Yes, why does finance like LGBT so much, for instance? Those are our questions we never ask, or feminism and stuff. And I explore that a little bit.
Okay, so are we...
But there's a monetary part also.
So are we seeing the dehumanization of society?
Yes, actually, it was the idea of the book came from some successful articles. So I did find out, like WHO, they have this in Europe. They have these programs, these sexual education programs, where you will initiate children like very early to some spooky sexual practices and stuff. And that's why I went back in time, and it's just things I discovered. I went back in time to the origins also of the LGBT, because it's very much related to the LGBT movement. You will teach children basically to rethink their identity, and in Germany, for instance, they expressly have this goal to influence from the state the personality, the sexuality of the children. And so I went back in time to discover what are the roots of that. And you have some social psychology thinkers, like around Sigmund Freud, for instance, who had this idea that you will expose children precociously to sexual activities to degenerate them, and it was really said like that.
How degenerate? What do you mean?
Psychologically, that they would be weaker mentally, and that you would they would thereby be more easily influenced, and you would have a society of people that you would very easily convince to that would be very easy to manipulate, basically, and to deal with.
Okay, so to make people more controllable?
Exactly, and it was set really like that. It's
and
not
Freud
something
Freud
that
said
I infer. It's very cynical.
And Freud was talking about that.
Sorry?
Sigmund Freud?
Actually, in his he wrote a book which is very impressive on and called something like Mass Psychology.
But you're talking about Edward Bernays, no?
Also, but it's a different story.
Okay, Freud wrote a book called Mass Psychology?
Yeah, Mass Psychology, yes, Freud, where it's very impressive. It was at the beginning, I think, 1921, beginning of the 20s, at any rate, and he imagined, like many years in advance, what the fascist propaganda would look like. What would be the psychological levies that you would activate to have this mass enthusiasm for around a leader who would lead the people to war, and to how do you get people enthusiastic about someone who has maybe a crazy project to enter into huge wars that are unwinnable. And he, in this book, he talks about Wilfried Trotter, which is this other psychologist. He's not very well known, but he refers. So Freud refers to this psychologist, and he kind of and this Wilfried Trotter, he also says very interestingly that Freud, the purpose of his psychoanalysis is not so much to treat people as to understand how they got into psychological problems, and he's incredibly cynical. And his idea is, how do we mass produce people who have like all kinds of neuroses, so as to make a society of people that are very easy to deal with and to control and to and
sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Maybe. And Freud, he didn't disagree with that. That's the crazy part of it. He wasn't at all angry that the other would interpret his work.
Crazy. Like and so, last question is on this one: so are we in a numeric slavery?
No, I don't think we will. Really, it's about scenarios, and also I'm focusing. Generally speaking, on economics. Also, I go into this question of it's a very basic economics. Like, why are we seeing? Because in Europe, as we had the lockdowns, suddenly appeared like huge bike lanes all over Europe. Like what?
In US too. Like
in the US also.
Yeah, and where no one's biking. Places where no one's biking.
They did put some biking lanes.
Very strange.
So here we have some kind of enthusiasm for biking and stuff from woke guys in city centers, you know. So there is some popular support, but all the people who need to go to work in the cities, like my hairdresser, she needs to go to work in the city, and she cannot park, for instance. And so all this traffic, and so we got huge bike lanes, or bike lanes that were like crazy ways that are impossible to manage. Yeah. And actually, you know what? all this has been theorized as being it's a methodology to get individual cars out of cities. And we have the technical school, the technology school here in Lausanne. They have a user's guide to how do you get individual cars out of cities. So first you put bike lanes, you put roadworks, you put like traffic lights that never go green. You put pedestrian zones. And you suppress also parking spaces. Like in Paris, they are suppressing dozens of thousands of parking spaces. So you just wonder, why is that? Why would they not want to get the cash from the people who want to park?
And why are they doing that?
And my hypothesis is that we are trying to, in the name of going green, etc., and we only want electric cars now in cities, and everybody cannot afford an electric car with a range of 300 kilometers. You're not going anywhere. You wouldn't come from Marseille with an electric car. You would need to stop 2-3 times maybe. So you don't go on vacation with that. So maybe not so many people are willing to invest into that. Is it
to control people, you think? Or?
I think, quite honestly, I think it's first of all for financial purposes to control mobility, but financially first of all, and also the food delivery thing. That is, if you reduce the mobility of people, and there is a study by McKinsey, they say they've been saying that for years, you reduce the mobility of people within cities, and so you force people, and more people will just order food. And this food delivery craze that we've had with the lockdowns, because basically you can go to a restaurant, you would only order, and of course, if you can centralize the food production, for instance, Nestle, the agri-food business, is very much interested in that. If you can centralize the production of food and then have it delivered to people directly, you control the value chain for the whole food production, and you financialize the whole catering business. So instead of having restaurants that no shareholders can...
That are independent businesses. They're small businesses.
Exactly.
You're saying by financialize, you mean the big financial banks or companies basically take control of these markets?
Yeah, or the Uber, or they create these ecosystems which will be highly financialized, and the shareholders will cash in on this business.
Okay, but just the previous point, the mobility point. So I just noticed a lot of cities, they talk about mobility, increasing mobility this, mobility that, but really they're restricting mobility.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So they're not promoting mobility. They're promoting, what's the opposite of mobility? Stagnation.
Immobility.
Immobility, huh? So they're really promoting immobility for political economic goals that maybe these officials aren't even aware of.
Like what?
I'm just saying the average city transportation official might not even know what they're doing, right?
Okay. I'm not sure about that.
Or they believe the argument that it's for mobility, but it's not.
No, I wonder, about the possibility of vested interest, because it's so much money at stake. And for instance, the boss of Uber, he says quite honestly that either people will take, when they want to have a eat, either they will take his taxes or they will order an Uber Eats to get their food. And in both cases, he will make money out of it. And so, why do I think that, that officials are aware of it? Because if you suppress parking spaces, you're depriving your city from income. So why would you do that?
So I'm just wondering, why are they promoting immobility in the name of mobility? I don't think the Phoenix, Arizona transportation guy is smart enough to even know what he's doing, Okay. So they're promoting immobility, getting rid of parking spaces, promoting bicycles, and all these things in the name of mobility, when it's the opposite. And So I'm wondering, like, why are they promoting immobility? What could be an explanation for that?
Mm.
To
Yeah,
to
I
discourage car driving, to keep people from driving cars, from private ownership of cars.
Yes, yes. You need to drive individual cars out. Ah, you mean in that way that you will but
Discourage and tax
it's really,
and regulate.
It's really much money to be made for digital mobility, as it is called.
That could be one aspect of it, but anyway,
Yes, yes.
I've just been observing this immobility,
Okay.
traffic calming,
Excellent. But also, the agri-food business is huge in Switzerland. Don't forget that. And they have an interest, like Nestle, they do have an interest for food deliveries, where they control the whole value chain. And also you have this possibility of having robots, like doing your food, customized dish, etc. They have that actually in Paris right now. You have a pizzeria, they have a robot, and it will do your pizza in front of it. But of course, it's not the most profitable way. You don't want to have one robot in each pizzeria. I guess it's a hype. What you want is to have these dark kitchens, they call it, or ghost kitchens, and there you can put your robots of all kinds, and they will be industrializing this production of food that can then be dispatched. So they are not all the time they are trying to show, yes, we are working with restaurants, but actually like the delivery guys. But actually, their business model is to kill restaurants and replace them with these industrialized dark kitchens.
Really?
And yes, because even Uber Eats, they said during the lockdowns, but we're not making any money. They were not profitable even during the lockdowns. Imagine that.
That's crazy.
So it's crazy. So it can be their business model to just go to restaurant, a guy on a bike, and then pick up the food. It's about industrializing. It's about concentrating the production, controlling the value chains, and if it's centralized, also the delivery will be more efficient.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to change topics a little bit, what do you think of this rise of Bitcoin and all this digital currencies and the central bank? And then the central banks making their own now, talking about making their own. What do you think of these CBDCs?
So the digital currencies,
central bank
digital currencies like the digital euro, the digital dollar, and the digital Swiss franc. So it's a very important topic, really, because when they are talking about that, they are actually talking about replacing the monetary system, because money doesn't work that way. It's not simply created like that by the central banks, and it would be when we go into this CBDC system, it will be the central bank that directly creates the money and maybe gives it to the bank that will then give you a loan or something. But it changes completely the structure of the financial system.
So right now there's a commercial bank intermediary between the customer, the business, and the central bank.
Yeah,
and this kind of cuts out the commercial banks, huh?
Yeah, the commercial banks are creating the money themselves. And it's very interesting because if you think about this new architecture of central banks creating the money, then you could imagine like lots of ways in which you would make this new monetary system work. But first of all, very important, you need to get rid of the old system before you introduce a new monetary system.
So that brings up the final topic of a crash or inflation or
so it's
hyperstagnation or whatever. Hyperstagflation.
Yes, so I see two ways of getting rid, because it's really what the boss of the Swiss National Bank said. You can't, if it's not broken, you can't fix it. So you need to break the old monetary system to introduce the new one that everybody now is preparing, that we hear about. Only we don't understand that this digital money thing would be such a big change, or will be in that case. And how do you break the financial system? I see two ways. Either deflation, like we have these laws now on the confiscation of bank deposits. So if you confiscate money, it causes a huge deflation. And it's been what central bankers have been working. This scenario of deflation, it's been worked upon by central bankers for the last 20 years or so. And the helicopter money also, the idea was created in relation to a situation of deflation. But also you could have hyperinflation. And I didn't think much about that until recently, because of the general situation, which is more inflationary, I guess.
Inflationary, yeah.
Inflationary.
Yeah, because we're seeing a lot of like house prices are going up heavily, and there's
in the US especially, I guess.
Yeah, and everywhere, I think to some degree. But at the same, so they collapsed all the businesses with the lockdowns, all the small, medium-sized businesses. So there's a downward pressure in prices from that. But then we see an upward pressure in prices in houses, and they've created a hell of a lot more loans and more money that's going into real estate and other things. So and those prices are going up, but when there's downward pressures, it's many things happening at the same time.
Yes, so hyperinflation, you basically need two things to achieve that. If you want to go that path, you need scarcity, you need shortages, and we hear more and more about shortages. Now we hear about rubber. I just read housing in the US. It's the worst ever. Because also construction materials, I think you have shortages. Mortgage mortgage interest rates are going up. So there are lots of inflationary pressures at the same time. And so that was the first condition. You need shortages. Also, oil prices are going up. And at the same time, you need to give money to the people. You need to have so shortages in basic consumption goods, like everyday goods. Also the food, it's very important. If you have, I think you have some inflation in food prices in the US right now. And the other aspect is you need to have people to give money to the people, because there is an inflation. So you need to bring money to the people, and I think that's what the US has been doing for a few. Even Donald Trump already started this helicopter money approach, where you give you send checks to the people. I think now you have healthcare that is also taken care of, and child allowances, and so. So it's the preconditions. It doesn't mean that there will be a hyperinflation. I guess you would need even more shortages, and then the government needs to give tries to remedy the shortages by giving more money to the people, and that's that kind of, you need this kind of dynamic where everybody's willing to spend their money as quickly as they can, because they know that it will be getting worthless very quickly, and it's a kind of a psychological stampede.
And so, what do you think people can invest in during this time, during that kind of scenario?
In this kind of scenario, I guess people would go to precious metals very quickly. That is when they start realizing, because hyperinflation, it can start very slowly. You hear the central bank saying, no, it will be temporary, then okay, maybe it's a bit higher, etc. And then suddenly it becomes it's an exponential, typically. It's described as an exponential, where suddenly it becomes very, very high, and people will kind of panic and try to buy anything they can with the money, as long as it's worth anything. So I think they would go to metals.
Do you think we'd enter something like that? Or because if the last 20 years are any indication, the central banks would probably try to figure out a different way they could still get the inflation without all the pain.
Sorry, I didn't grasp.
I feel like the central banks would commit the inflation, or the banking industry and the central banks together, and then but without causing the hyperinflationary catastrophe.
Yes, I'm not sure that it will happen. I'm not saying it will happen. I heard some people say that it will, for some establishment people like Ron Paul, he was a presidential candidate, I think, and a Bill Clinton advisor also talked about it. So some people are like having this idea that it could happen. Also, I read a Bloomberg article saying no, it won't happen, but the argumentation was a bit weak. But certainly, you would need some kind of maybe a geopolitical catastrophe, so that you would really need a big disruption somewhere in supply chains, so that it really gets worse quickly. But then you also need the government to keep injecting ever more money and acting like they are stupid and don't understand that there are shortages, and try to remedy the shortages by injecting ever more money. But that would be a way of breaking the monetary system, I think. And also, it would also give some relief in relation to debt. That is, because deflationary scenario is bad in relation to debt, because debt is worth more suddenly, whereas a hyperinflationary scenario would actually release people from debt, I think. And maybe for the US it wouldn't be such a bad choice. I don't know, because the weight of debt is not only public debt.
Yeah, it would wipe out debts, but it would also wipe out a lot of assets. So it would be a mixed bag. You'd punish savers and then reward indebted people. Yeah. So it'd be a mixed bag, like everything.
So I guess people would try to hedge themselves by running into precious metals and running into, maybe those who believe in cryptocurrencies maybe would head for...
The last question before we wrap up, what do you think about cryptocurrencies? Like Bitcoin and all these other things.
Yeah, I follow the Warren Buffett advice that if you don't understand it, don't go into it. So I have many questions about Bitcoin that I haven't really investigated very thoroughly, because I'm not really that interested personally. But I would ask the question, if I were to put any money in it, like, who's in charge? What happens if there is any kind of breakdown in the infrastructures or whatever? And also, I wonder, because there is this mining process where the people who provide the infrastructure for the transactions actually get rewarded for it by receiving new bitcoins. And I wonder, because there is a limited amount of bitcoins that will get mined. So I'm wondering, if the price, if they're getting ever less bitcoins for doing the same work, and the price of Bitcoin is not necessarily going up all the time, then at some point maybe it will not be profitable to mine them. It's just a question I have. No, so maybe it's a real stupid question, but I wouldn't buy anything like that if I didn't have the answer.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time today.
It
was a real pleasure. Yeah. So hope this discussion was helpful for people to hear, and they can check out your books on the credits that you want to hold some of these guys. And okay, great. Well, thank you.
So thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.